So I wanted to share with you my little project for today. I'm working on my Honda NSR, and one of the challenges is fairings are not readily available, so I'm making a change here. What I have is the original fairing mount, which has two arms that reach out and attach to the stock fairing on a Honda NSR. What I've done is remove this bracket, and instead I've put on a fairing stay for a Kayo MR150, and I've bolted this alternate fairing mount onto the front. This fairing mount, I've had to make my own aluminum piece here to be able to attach the tachometer with 3 holes for the bolt mounts, and then to allow a pass-through for the tack cable. And then this mount has a front plug opening where it's going to attach to the front Kayo fairing. I'm doing all this work so that I can use a different front fairing on the bike, since the current supply of NSR150 are pretty hard to come by. Anyway, this is what I've done so far. It's allowed me to mount up my NSR tack to the Kayo mount. And then I'm going to be working on making the fairing attached to the front fairing mount. And then down here, I'm going to have to make off of the frame some of my own custom mounts to be able to put the Kayo fairing on. Anyway, that's what I'm working on right now, is the fairing mounts. To make my fairing mounts for the frame, I bought some steel tubing on Amazon. And to do this, I have fashioned up this little mount here. All I did was smash the end of the tube shut. And then this is going to be drilled and mount to the NSR fairing. In the end of the tube are the little plastic mounts that the Kayo fairing uses. You can see that they fit into the tube here and allow the fairing to come on and off the bike. So ultimately, it's just going to be an open tube bolted to the frame. And then I'm going to work on fitting it up and making everything work with the fairing. Here I have the fairing that I bought from SV Racing Parts for an MR150. I'm putting this on my NSR. So let me turn this over so you can see the inside. Here we have the inside. I have put the mounts for the fairing already on both sides. There's 2 pins. I've also attached the pins to the side. These fit on the fairing mounts for the MR that I'm building my own mounts as well for the NSR. The next step we have here is I have to locate the front of the fairing. Down here is a glassed-in piece. This is part of the stock part that we have to put this pin on, and I've seen others forget to put this piece in. We have to drill a hole through here, and then we can reach up behind. You can see with my finger here, it's open behind. We can get a wrench back there to put a screw in to hold this in place. I would not recommend gluing it on. But the next step here is I have marked where the pin is supposed to go. Hopefully you can see my little mark there. And then it's just a matter of coming in and drilling the mount hole. Which, I'll show you the finished hole. Okay, so I've managed to drill my hole through the fiberglass. It only took a second, but it required 2 hands. This next piece, I have to get this bolt in from the back side and through the hole. And it looks like my hole's a little too small. But once we get the bolt in, we just need to be able to get a wrench on it to tighten the bolt into the post. That's going to go in from this side. Okay, now that I've drilled my hole out, I'm going to put in the bolt here. I'm using, just to point out, this is a very wide head flat fender washer. It has a hex opening in it, which it's going to be hard to tighten the bolt once we put it in here. But what I wanted to share from this process, hopefully you can see this, is that when I put the post over, I can tighten the post. And the reality is, while I'm holding the bolt from the back with a finger, there's enough friction on this fiberglass material that the bolt really doesn't turn. So I can put the post on and just tighten the post, and it seems to tighten up quite nicely without having to get a wrench on it. Otherwise, I'd have to use a hex bolt or something I could get a wrench back in here to tighten. So from the overhead view, you can see I'm going to hold the bolt in back with my fingers, keep it from turning, and just tighten the plastic post down. And this is all stock Kayo MR150 hardware, or the posts are and all that. Once I get that tightened, I'm just going to take a bolt on the post and turn it till I get kind of lined up. And this is nice plastic, so it's not going to vibrate loose the way metal would, but this fiberglass is a little bit sticky, just ever so much, that it keeps that bolt from turning, which is kind of nice. Anyway, we have our post in here, and this should be ready to fit up on the bike. Here we are in the garage with my NSR50 on the lift. I have the fairing we were just modifying, and you can see down here that the post on the front of the fairing that we just installed needs to fit into the fairing mount here. It's really kind of hard to see, but I have noticed other MR150s that for whatever reason just failed to install that mount. You could put the fairing on the bike without the one at the front, but that gives it a lot of stability side by side that I can move the bike. So highly recommended to include it. The NSR, because we're using this new meter stay here, and it doesn't have anywhere else that attaches to the fairing. So this one's really critical for this NSR build here. The next piece back here then is going to be getting the side fairings in place. And then right here, we're gonna need to put a mount to attach the fairing to the frame on the NSR. And I'm gonna do that with a steel tube, and I'm gonna bolt that tube to the frame. Just like the front mount here, it uses a post that fits inside of a metal tube, and that's gonna hold it in place. Once that's done, we will have a final fairing mount up here on the triple clamp. That's gonna be this guy here. So we're gonna work on fitting that up next. The fairing mount here that I'm using is also MR150 parts, but it's probably gonna take a little bending, etc., to make it fit the NSR, since the NSR is a little bit different. Here is how I made these fairing mounts. Again, it's just steel tube. I'm cutting this very short, but all I did was I put the tube in a vise, and I cranked the vise down on the end of the tube to make it flat. Then it's just turning it 90 degrees, and voila, I have a flattened mounting surface to use with my tube. I then need to drill a hole through the flat part here at the end, and I have my mount for my NSR. The last thing I did here was I marked my fairing mount, and I put it in a vise in a drill press. That way I could perfectly drill a hole in the end of the mount for my R clip. The clip is what holds the peg that's in the fairing. It has a hole in it. Let's see if I can show that. It has a little hole in the end of the mount. That's gonna line up with the hole I drilled in the end of my fairing mount. And then you put a clip through it to hold both pieces together. This peg that I'm holding goes on the side fairing. What I have here is my fairing mount that I've made that it's just a steel tube, 1/2 inch inside diameter, and then I just flattened the end of the tube and bent it to the side to form the mount. I have put a mark on the flat part here to line up with the fairing mount, and I'm going to drill this for a bolt, and literally it's just one bolt holding the post to the side. The post will then line up with the mounting peg. There's a little pin on the inside of the fairing, and I'm going to do that on both sides of the bike to try to fit this fairing up. I have drilled out and put a bolt in the little mount we're going to make, and then it's just a matter of bolting it down to the frame, and then the fairing should fit up nicely to that. Make sure you put Loctite on the bolt, and we should be good. Now that I have the side fairing mount installed, the tube fits onto the pin on the back side. We're pretty good here. I then came up to the top and I put the fairing mount on. This is an MR150. It literally just fits into the steering stem here. I had to change the nut on the top clamp because there's a pin that goes through the top nut. The original NSR had a solid fork nut on top, so that was one of the modifications. Otherwise, it's literally just using the MR150 mount to secure the fairing. So that all looks good. The only thing left to do is build the mount for the other side of the fairing. And we should be very close to fitting up our new fairing on the NSR50, which will make crashing much easier to repair in the future with a supply of fairings.